together. So let's do something together, right? We're building rapport, not in the like spy sense. We're building a relationship. We're trying to establish some sort of collegiality, work ethos or something. Let me check in, make sure all of the levels are correct, right? Takes a second. I've got a couple of things up. Now that they have all of this analytics in all of the websites, sometimes if you have certain websites up, it takes a while to load because they're hooking up the crypto that's going to work while you're looking at their site. It's as if you're being charged, you're paying attention. And I'm paying attention right now to this article I just found talking about something I did not know. It's dated for January 10th of this year. A small tax change is a boon for permanent life insurance. Federal lawmakers' big year end spending package includes a little noticed revision of the tax code that is likely to boost sales of life insurance, particularly for wealthy Americans. The law lowers a minimum interest rate used to determine whether combination savings and death benefit policies, known as permanent life insurance, are too much like investments to qualify for tax advantages granted to insurance. The interest rate floor was put in place in 1984 to weed out policies that were mostly investment vehicles with a thin layer of insurance. Lowering the rate allows owners to put more in the savings portion, and it makes it more feasible for insurers to offer policies since rates have tumbled so far in the past decade that the 1980s era minimum limit is now well above long-term government bond yields. This has led insurers to warn they might quit selling some of the policies. The reduction on the interest rate assumption was effective January 1st on new sales. You know what that means? That means that by January 10th, there would be some very substantial action happening if you were using your life insurance policy as they say, uh, an investment vehicle. Wouldn't it? Yes, it would. And then there would be another after 30 days in case you decided you had any accounts connected to it that you needed to close and it took 30 days to close those accounts. That happens sometimes. Like when you say, I need to shut down this email, and okay, well, we'll shut it down in 30 days. Why do you need 30 more days with my email before you can shut it down? Well, because while you're using your email, somebody else is using your email account for a bunch of other investments. And depending upon who you are and what you do with your email, they might be very sizable investments. And it takes 30 days to shut them down and redirect them somewhere else, right? Yes, it does, right? So these are the things we're dealing with. In 2016, I briefly met with some people that said that they were trying to help people in getting jobs selling insurance. And I went to a presentation. It just so happened that the headquarters for that company is right here in Dallas. I've been in Dallas this whole time. It's been conveniently unavailable for me to meet with anybody from that organization. But one of the things that happened is while we were in this training, and I was learning some things at the inception of it, that at some point I became concerned because it came to my attention that there are those that understand that we're at a point now where the culture around acquiring and maintaining a life insurance policy is very different than it was 40 years ago, very different than 50 years ago. And in the meantime, what's happened is there's been changes to the new generation buying into those kinds of life insurance policies, even though we have a very substantial older generation that bought life insurance policies with certain expectations. Baby boomers are not just about Medicare. That aging population, the retiree population, it's not just about Medicare. There are people that actually did other things to provide for their long term end of life care and for what would be considered to be the assets or the inheritance they would bestow onto others in the event of their death, which hopefully comes when they're old and under natural causes so that they could just transfer the estate. But then the question becomes, well, what if you're murdered? Is there a difference in terms of the life insurance benefits that you pass on if you're murdered. Well, I don't know so much about that. There's another article. I might need to do some information. Excuse me. Did you? About that. But one thing I do know is when I was younger, this was a situation we had to deal with. There is something that happens to your life insurance policy, and especially your estate, your intangible estate, as they were discussing in the most recent Supreme Court opinion. When you are determined to have had a death by suicide. So if you're murdered and they characterize it as suicide, this does something very substantial to your estate and your capacity to transmit your estate to others upon your death. If you die because of a medical condition, well, were there obligations associated with your medical treatment? If you get sick and you need some sort of critical care, and then you die in the course of being in the hospital. See, it's different if you die in the hospital than if you die at your home, or if you die at a convalescence home, or if you die on site at the time and then they take your body to the hospital. These are different places where the actual terminating event occurs that would be listed on the death certificate, the information about the death, the examination or investigation into the cause of death in order to determine various elements associated with the life insurance payout would also be impacted by those factors. So, what's the major difference between acknowledging somebody was murdered versus somebody committed suicide? I contend it has to do with the transmittal of the intangible estate upon death. If you say that it's a suicide, well, some estates do not get to vest. Some policies do not get to vest to the beneficiaries. So who gets access to that intangible estate? If you're involved in a very high profile, very, very provocative investigation, or maybe you're bringing charges individually, or maybe as part of a movement or a collective, and then your death is allowed to be characterized as a suicide, does that terminate the transmission? Do you not get to transmit or have a bestowal of it onto your inheritors of your intangible estate, so that what you're processing and what you're dealing with, including the tactics, including the techniques, is able to actually vest with your beneficiaries or with your community? Or is it instead allowed to be captured by somebody, including somebody in public office? Somebody that might, for whatever reason, be able to claim that they're involved in some proceeding or process, and so for whatever reason, they have access to a means by which they can put that into some sort of bond. And then they bond that pending the proceeding. Well, what happens when they drop the charges? Does it then become commercially available? Can you issue stock with it 6 months later? I contend that's exactly what they've been doing. They've been doing it for a very, very long time, right? How many people committed suicide since the onset and the declaration of COVID-19? Did they have to? Let me ask you this. How many people died of other causes but were allowed to have them misidentified as death by COVID-19? How many people were murdered with COVID-19? It's different. What bestows onto your family? If you create some sort of futures contract based upon the information compiled upon their death, and then you allow for it to be traded overnight, what can you do with that? Or is that one of those things that's included in the disclosure on a lot of these recent municipal bonds that says, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we cannot guarantee everything in here the same way it was before, right? The expectations are different, right? Has anybody actually done any research about what the intended maturity vestment of all these catastrophic bonds is? How do you pay or deliver on the maturation of a catastrophic bond? I'm just asking. I think I'm not the only person that has these questions. I've had these questions, actually, some of them, since 2016. I was told that the headquarters was in Dallas. I've been in Dallas for over 2 years. HQ never got back to me. Neither did the insurance commission.